Recording. So welcome to tonight's event, sponsored by EnergizeWayland. We're a local group in Wayland dedicated to addressing the risks of climate change and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and preparing for a changing climate by engaging with neighbors and friends in town so that we can support each other in taking individual household actions and also supporting local policy and programmatic changes at the town level. I know many of you are from Wayland, but many of you may not be from Wayland. And before we get to our wonderful speaker that my terrific colleagues Shelley and Jean will tell you more about and hear about sowing seeds, which is why you're here tonight, just a brief mention of EnergizeWayland if you're not familiar with us. We are, as I said, a group of local residents that are trying to support our neighbors and our friends in town to take actions to mitigate our climate risks. Our goal, we have about 4,600 households in Wayland. Our goal is that 1,000 households take some action by the end of 2021. We'll have to change this and move it up. We have almost 540 households that have done something, and they've collectively taken over 2,000 actions. And if you're not already signed into our platform, this button here on the top right allows you to sign in very briefly with an email and a password and create a profile. You, of course, can use the site even without that, but it allows us to count you and also just alert you about events that are coming up. We don't bombard you with email, but tell you about things that are happening in town like this event and many others. You'll see there are events on electric vehicles, greening the holidays, and a variety of other events coming up. In our platform, you can also see a variety of actions that you can take as an individual, and I'll just go down to the one that's relevant to tonight, eco-landscaping. And in all of our actions, you'll be able to understand what it's about and see some steps to take. And I'm hoping that after tonight, we can actually make the steps to take on tonight's topic a little bit more robust with support from Freddie. So that is what we're hoping that folks will do in Wayland, and we have similar programs operating with our colleagues in Newton, Natick, Concord, and 20 other towns. So it's a great way to see what you can do, log what you're doing, and also read testimonials from other folks in town that have taken the action you're interested in. So with that, I will hand it over to my terrific colleague, Shelley Truckus, who will introduce tonight's speaker. I'm really just your tech host for the rest of the night. If you have any technical issues, please put them in the chat and we'll try and help you out. But I think at this point, most of us are pretty good on the Zoom front. And let me hand it over to Shelley.
Okay, so thanks, Ellen. I'm Shelley Truxas. I'm part of the EnergizeWayland team, and I am very happy to introduce our speaker for tonight, Freddie Gillespie. Freddie has been an environmental problem solver and activist for 20 years at both the local and regional levels. She is the chair of the MetroWest Conservation Alliance Native Pollination Task Force, which is working to restore native pollination systems in the 36 communities in the MetroWest Conservation Alliance region, of which Wayland is one. In Southborough, she chairs the town's Open Space Preservation Commission and sits on the Stewardship Committee, where she helps manage Breakneck Hill Conservation Land. So I am really happy to welcome Freddie to our group and to say we're very excited about your talk. Take it away, Freddie.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to share my screen now and hoping this goes the way I want it.
Let me just interrupt but Jean has put in the chat. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. And Jean will be monitoring that chat and helping to facilitate the way that we ask questions over the course of Freddie's wonderful talk.
Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes, all good, Freddie.
Okay, great. That's always the fear. Okay, everyone. I'm Freddie Gillespie, as I was just introduced, and I have have 5 different presentations I'm going to go through. So it's going to be kind of an overview with a little bit of a focus on projects I've been engaged in and how that leads up to this upcoming winter sow program that EnergizeWayland is going to be participating in. And I just wanted to start out with, so why are we here, right? What's the problem? And I'll be going into it in a little more detail, but when I first started this journey, I had no idea. I thought there was, well, first of all, I wasn't even thinking about bumblebees. I was thinking about monarch butterflies. And then with bumblebees, I thought there was one bumblebee. I had no clue that we had typically, historically, 11 species of bumblebees in Massachusetts. 2 of them are already extirpated from the state. One is on the National Endangered Species list. Another one is proposed for that list, and 2 more are on their way out of Massachusetts, Bombus Fervatus and Bombus vagans, which are 2 we're kind of focused on. And I want to give Alan from Newton, you know, I never say his last name, so I'd murder it, I'm afraid, but he actually created this slide, and I really believe in stealing good information, so I'm using it as well. So I'm going to start with part 1, Breakneck Hill Conservation Land, a pollination journey. Our Open Space Preservation Commission has a native pollinator, native plant initiative. This is our conservation land, Breakneck Hill, back in early 2000. It was declared by Peter Alden when he was working for the state. He was Mr. Biodiversity back in the day. I led a Biodiversity Day walk. The worst Oriental bittersweet infestation in MetroWest. We had like 40 acres of dead apple trees supporting the rolling bittersweet landscape that had killed the apple trees. We got funding and we did a clear cut and some treatment. And this is it before. If you see that, can you see my cursor? I'm not sure, but if you see that red man down the trail, it's about the same place these people are walking up the trail. So it was a pretty drastic restoration project. And then we had this great landscape after the restoration. We're managing about 10 acres for declining species of grassland birds. We're trying to get them to breed here. We've had some success. We've had kestrels show up. So we're doing really pretty well. But one thing was, after we did the clear cut, there was no milkweed. We were told, don't worry, you don't have to plant, you know, plants will come in, and but there was no milkweed. So we went on a journey of planting milkweed, lots and lots of milkweed. That was almost a hedge. That brought in the monarch butterflies. So we're doing pretty good, and we'll start managing the property for monarchs and other butterflies, mowing late in the season. I call them the gateway drug to pollinators. You get interested in monarchs and, you know, you start looking more and paying more attention to other species, but still mostly butterflies we were paying attention to. We installed 3 pollinator gardens and had lots of butterflies. We were listed as a hot spot for butterflying by Mass Butterfly Club, the Massachusetts Butterfly Club, which is a great organization. So, you know, we're doing really well. I need to go back. 2015, I wasn't invited. I drove out to Western Mass to go see this Beyond the Honeybees. It was a workshop that we're worried about the wrong bee. And at that workshop, I met Dr. Robert G. Gear was giving one of the talks. And afterwards, I invited him to come to Breakneck Hill. You know, I thought, you know, he could review what we were doing, offer some suggestions, and, you know, kind of give me a thumbs up, great job there, pat on the back. Well, he changed everything. We didn't know what we didn't know. And lucky for me, if I could have paid it, I would, but a Bombus Fervatus flew by when shortly after he arrived, and he was able to, he captured it with his net and put it in a little vial. He was so excited to show it to me and then let it go without any harm done. But it was the first one he'd seen all season. This was a species that had been very common. And he began we were his first research site. Began, and I'll go over more of this later, but a weekly grid survey. He had his grad students monitoring Breakneck Hill. And we had citizens that were trained to identify bumblebees. And I like to say that I have told him that the biggest return on his investment with us was he learned what you can and cannot expect from volunteers. The first out, he gave us these sheets to identify the bees. It talked about round face, square face, who knew? I mean, and long tongue, short tongue. And we would just go out and actually be laughing like, oh yeah, there's a round face, long tongue. We had no idea. So then he says, well, take pictures. Well, our pictures weren't very good. So now he has you take a video and you can scrub a video to get the perfect shot that will be easily or more easily identifiable. So what did we find? We found Bombus Fervatus. That's one of the at-risk species in the state and listed as of highest conservation need on the state wildlife action plan. It was pretty much always on red clover and sometimes on zinnia in the community gardens. Well, there it is on the zinnia. So that's what we found. And now I'm going to switch over to Dr. Jagir's research. So he gave a presentation last night for the Southborough Rotary Club, and I have a few of his slides. It was more than just the buzz. His first presentations for us was, just the buzz, and now it's more than just the buzz because his research has gone further than when he first came to Breakneck Hill in 2015. We're only one of many locations, but using ecological data to restore native pollination systems. And it's using the data. So he's been collecting data. He's not just guessing, right? He's out there, he's getting the list of what bees are using which plants. So, one of the things we all hear about, why is pollination important? Everyone's talking about pollination, and it is really important for the food we eat. I think everyone's heard these statistics, 4 out of every 5 bites of food you eat is based on a pollinator. I may have that statistic wrong, but most of this agriculture is done by honeybees, and it is for the factory farms. You have acres and acres of one crop. They need one species to go out there and pollinate. And then when that plant's out of bloom, they can bring those honeybees, or they're transportable to another area. But as our first workshop beyond the honeybees, we're worried about the wrong bees. People weren't and still aren't paying enough attention to our wild native bees. And that's where his research comes in. So wild pollination systems are degraded at an alarming rate worldwide. It's happening in our own backyards, though, and we can do something about it. So here's one plant, and this is a theme that's going to be repeated throughout my talk and that you think about, right? So this is Bombus Fervatus, and this is a species, a native rose that it likes to use, right? So we plant these plants when we're trying to help this species instead of non-native roses and other roses. But what happens is this plant, it's a native plant, and when you plant it, it helps other birds, it helps other moths, it's host plants, and it also, like the eastern whippoorwill, is a species at risk. It will help that. So it's not just one bee, one plant. And when we talk about pollination, and it's why the Native Pollination Systems Task Force changed our name. We had previously been the Native Pollinator Task Force. That's because it's not about the pollinator. It's not about the bee or the butterfly. It's about the relationship between that animal and the plants. And it's really important to understand that we can't just plant these gardens that are trying to have lots of bees or butterflies on them. It's way more complicated than that and complex. So one of the things we also became aware of, and his research shows, is that in this top left slide or picture, can you see my cursor? I'm not sure if that's showing up for you. Okay, so these are all the historical bees, bumblebees in Massachusetts, and you can see why the tall yellow line bars, some of them are doing quite well. They've increased over, the blue is their historical numbers. Dr. Jagir got their pre-2000 numbers, historic data, and then he went out and surveyed. And what he found is that some of them were doing quite well, Bombus impatiens and grissycolis. But these other ones are crashing, and that's the Bombus Fervatus, vagans. I focus on Fervatus and vagans because the other one is not, it's in higher elevation, so it's not something we encounter around here. So these species, some are doing better and some are doing not well at all. The same thing is happening with, the butterflies. And we haven't gotten, he just started doing the butterfly data collection, so I'm not as familiar with that, so I'm not going to focus on it, but he certainly does. But so aren't the plants, right? Plants are crashing as well. And guess what? When you look at the list from his research of which plants the at-risk species of bumblebees use, guess what? There's a high percentage of those that are also state listed as endangered, at risk, special concern. So if you look here, this is Penstemon Pursuitis. It is, when we planted it, it had constant visiting by Bombus Fervatus. It is an endangered plant, state listed. Fervatus is on its way out. We call this, which is it? You lose the pollinator, you lose the plant, you lose the plant, you lose the pollinator. There's a connection here. So one of the things he talks about is, what are the problems? And we all know there's climate change, pesticide use, we can make a difference there. Disease, that's a lot of disease is coming in from imported non-native bees like honeybees. There's lots of research coming out showing how much they are negatively impacting our wild species of bees. And that really, what I said before, factory farms, acres and acres of, the same plant. Yes, honeybees are important there, but we really are mistaken when we believe that by putting in backyard honeybee hives that we're helping. We're not. We're actually causing damage from not only disease, but also from over competition. Climate change, you guys are working on that, EnergizeWayland. There's things we can do, steps we can take. But as far as my focus on our conservation land, it's been dealing with improving the habitat and, the exotic non-native invasive species. But the exotic non-native species go to bees as well, right? They're not helping. Just think about it. Our non-native honeybees in our conservation land and on, in backyards where they're not on a big factory farm, they are really great at pollinating non-native invasive species. You will find Japanese knotweed, purple loosestrife covered in honeybees. So, and then their populations soar and they outcompete the native bees. So Dr. G. Geer has data-driven approach. He has these research sites. I'm holding this one here. This is one in the middle, that's Breakneck Hill. And if you can see all those stripes, those are the grids that he surveyed since 2015. His grad student did it weekly for several years, and then he continued on for years afterwards. And we now have three or four different grad students back there again this year, starting in 2021. So not sure what that is. I skipped one. So the point is, he's not just coming up with reading lists, he's out there researching, and not just at one site, but at numerous sites across the state. But he knows he can't be everywhere. So he came up with a Ecology Citizen Science Project. You all can participate in that. It's an action you can do. And it's what I said, you go out and you take a video and you upload it, and it will ID the bee and the plant it's using so that they can find out which bees are using which plants. And now they're doing butterflies. It started out with bumblebees, but they're doing other bees and butterflies too. And I added this number 4. This was from Rob's slide, but number 4, one of the things that's really important is Rob came up with this list. It's dynamic. It's changing. If he gets new information, he'll add plants. And if he finds out some of the plants aren't as well suited, they'll come off. But he doesn't just think, oh, here's the list, go use it. He goes back after you put these plants in and surveys to see, are they coming? Is it making a difference? And I can tell you, yes, it is. Anyhow, this is a portion of his list. You can see that you have, this is pollen sources. You can see the bloom time. You can see the 3 species of bumblebees, but he's also looking at butterflies and other bees. And again, I only look at the Fervatus and vagans on the far right up here of the bumblebees because those are the ones in our area. So we're planting for them. And I'm also more focused. It makes it easier. Everything that helps Fervatus also helps vagans. So if I cover Fervatus, all its needs, then you're covering vagans as well. And I think I skipped this part. And who knew this? I didn't know. Bumblebees need both pollen and nectar their entire life span, right? So they emerge, the queen emerges in early spring, and right away she needs pollen. 24 hours to 48 hours, no pollen, she's dead. That's it, gone. And the whole next generation she could have created is gone. And then they need pollen, because without pollen, the fertilized egg she's carrying cannot reach maturity. So pollen is the source of your next generation, and the nectar is the source of fuel for the current. So pollen and nectar every month. You need it every month till they go back into hibernation in the fall. And that's the one thing also, this list is based on 18,683 observations. So these are some of the plants he's come up with that are helping our most at-risk species. I'm not going to dwell on this because you can hope. Oh, did I mention he'll be coming to Wayland to do a presentation? So I'm really not trying to give his presentation, but just a little overview. Plus I had his slides, so why not? No, he said I could. This here is Breakneck Hill again. And this is area that's encircled. That was a purple loosestrife. It would have thousands of honeybees and Bombus impatiens. Now, Bombus impatiens is one of the species of bumblebees that's increasing its numbers. And it seems that it likes a lot of the same plants that honeybees like. And it's also one of the things I noticed, this is not science on Dr. G. Gears. I probably shouldn't say it in this portion of the talk, but I will. We noticed that a lot of the plants that you're on these plant lists tend to be geared towards honeybees and therefore the Bombus impatiens also. So we're feeding a lot of these bees that aren't in trouble. So anyhow, this is back to the purple loosestrife. It was at Breakneck Hill. All we had was very few. Some years, Dr. G. Gear wouldn't see any Bombus Fervatus at Breakneck Hill. We thought we lost the population. No one saw one all of 2019. So we removed, a couple of things happened in 2020. We removed the purple loosestrife after 3 years, and the favored plants of Bombus Fervatus and vagans filled in. This wasn't with seeding, they just came in. This is monkey flower, Mimulus rigens, swamp milkweed, the rose, the swamp rose, the jewel weed, Joe Pye weed, I think that's turtle head maybe, and some other plants. So they came in, and guess what? Almost immediately, Dr. G. Gear found Fervatus and vagans on the monkey flower when we had the whole population crash the year before. And I want you to remember when I said we had planted 3 pollinator gardens on Breakneck Hill. Those pollinator gardens were there. And since 2015, when we started looking, we have never yet seen Bombus Fervatus on any of the plants there. And those were planted with native plants, those typical plant lists that you have from Xerces Society, pollinator.org. There's a message there, some real information when you think about that. Oh, this is I guess this is the video. That's both Fervatus and vagans showed up on that monkey flower. I don't know why video comes in sideways, but. So One of the things also that he found, and that's what I was just talking about, see, these here are plants we put in our pollinator garden. Everyone will tell you that mountain mint is a fantastic plant. Well, if you look at this chart, this is Bombus Fervatus, vagans, chrysocollus, and impatiens. We had both Fervatus and vagans in until these other plants that fed the Bombus impatiens and honeybees started to bloom, and then he didn't see them again that year. So what happens? These are native plants. People think they're great plants, but if you're not putting in the plants that are at-risk species need, they can't compete with all those honeybees and Bombus impatiens, even on plants they like. So there's a tale to be told about what plants you're planting. I'm not saying don't plant any of these other native plants, but there has to be a proportional value, and we have got to start getting these plants for the at-risk species planted. These, another story is cultivars are not the same as the real thing. I keep having people say, oh, Annie White's survey said that they're the same. If you dig deep, that's not really what it says. And even if there was one plant that was as good as, why risk it? Who's certifying? I had someone tell me, oh, well, they sell cultivars at Garden in the Woods, so those have been researched and are okay. And it's just not true. We have purchased some plants there by mistake. We thought they were straight species, and they actually had no nectar. Nectar is one of the first things that is removed when they cultivate. It's not like they do it on purpose, but when you when you breed for one trait, what people like, one of the first things that goes often is nectar, pollen, things that the insects like, landing spaces. So just stay with straight species, and we're working to get more of them available in the nurseries. Everyone who's working on these projects, when we go to the stores, we ask, and there's more nurseries that are available, selling plants that make it available. So this is just, I won't spend much time here, but it's a slide of different cultivars of the coneflower, and it shows that when you look at species of bees and butterflies, who's actually preferring which one of these plants. And every single time the straight species comes ahead. Granted, that's just one plant, but. So data-driven restoration success in 1 year. Dr. Jagir knows I hate this picture of the Ecology research garden. I'll go into that a little bit more, but he likes it because it shows the size of it, and it's not that large compared to the 40 acres of meadows surrounding it, but it made a huge difference. As soon as we planted it, Fervatus and Vagans showed up in 2020, and we'll have more pictures on that. Showy goldenrod is one of the plants he really likes. It's a late season plant. It's not your typical goldenrod. It's one of the better ones for the bees to bulk up before they go into hibernation. And this here is again the Penstemon Pursuitis. It's the one that's also state listed. Oh, and you'll see in some of these pictures, these little white bags, that's his research student doing some work there. Oh, that's my voice in the background. Let's get out of there. Anyhow, these are supposedly, you can see the bees are going in. And these are the at-risk bees that we had none the year before. Like every time I click, it shows another one. I'm kind of laughing here. I can't see your faces. I hope you are too. You also have to create nesting habitat. There's not a lot of knowledge about what they use. He's still researching for bumblebees, but tall grasses is important. They use old rodent holes. We need to leave bare soil. That's another thing. I'll get to a little bit more about that. And this picture just came up. This is Breakneck Hill Conservation Land, and I'll go into this a little bit more, but that's the white-throated sparrow, which is a species of highest conservation need in the state of Massachusetts, as well as many other states. This is on Shrubby St. John's wort, which is a pollen species for the at-risk bumblebees. And here there was a whole flock of this and juncos feeding on the seeds here. So again, that connection, you're not just helping these a couple of bumblebees here and there. That's the end of his presentation that I cut. This is Breakneck Hill Conservation Land 2020. I hope I'm not too repetitive here, but you know, COVID was a friend to us in some ways because Dr. G. Gear said he'd like a plot of land and to put some of his plants in at our community gardens. And this was an area that had been abandoned, much bigger than what he was thinking. And we were able to clear that out in 1 year, which I don't typically recommend because you should do a thing called soil prep to get all this weed pressure out. And this is what it looked like. Those were some plants he gave us. The volunteers from, I have a Facebook group called Native Plant Gardens of Southborough. We allow other people to join from outside of Southborough, and it's a good thing because some of them have been our best volunteers. Has over 500 members right now. Here we are after we cleared it out. It was wonderful. It all looked like bare dirt, so we could plant. That didn't last long. If you see this green on the outside of the fence, that's all weeds, and the inside of the fence looked like that as well. We ended up having to wall-to-wall carpet it with cardboard. We brought in mulch, which we don't recommend when you have a, you know, bare soil that's not weed seed infested, because you want bare soil for the bees. We prefer, eventually we hope this will all be like native ground cover is mulch instead of the wood chips, but we had to do it for this. We actually, the weeds came in so heavy, we had to mow them, and then we put the cardboard down, and then we, in these raised, they're not really raised, it was just, we put in topsoil enough to get the plants in. And if you would remember that picture I said I didn't like because it just looked like a big square of wood chips. This is actually a plan of the garden. We put in hundreds of plants, and one of the things, because it's a research garden, it's not planned to be a pretty designed garden. It's there so that there's big areas for, you know, people to walk around and do research or for group viewings. So this is the same list I showed before, but this one actually shows some of the pollen. There's more pages, but I'm not sticking them all in here. It also lists host plants for butterflies, and then you will think of other species for other, other plants for other bees, because it's not just bumblebees, right? And this here is the case of the honeybee on the purple loosestrife. When we had that purple loosestrife infestation, and we had thousands of honeybees and none of the Bombus Fervatus or vagans, that as soon as we got rid of the purple loosestrife, the honeybee population was reduced, and the plants came in for the at-risk species who then repopulated the landscape. This here is a Bombus. This was my big success story. In the Ecology research garden, we put in this is steeple bush, and I was just there. Now I've spent since 2015 walking Breakneck Hill often, looking and looking for Bombus Fervatus, and only came across it a few times. And here I am in the garden. I don't know what I was doing, weeding or something, and I looked over, and there it was. And when I saw this, I texted Rob right away. And we were so excited because this is the data he needed. It proved that if you plant it, they will come, because this was 2020. 2019, all we had seen is one sickly one early spring. We think either it was, maybe it didn't have enough nectar to survive, or maybe there was some disease it had caught, but one queen we saw, and then none the rest of the year, and we thought we had lost it forever. And the rest of this year, this coincided with the removal of the purple loosestrife, and we had a very robust year. Not sure what that is. Oh, here's that video again. I'm just going to keep going. So one of the things we did was we had a Fervatus plant quest. Back on the other side of the property where we had these pollinator gardens, we went and we said, well, do we have any, there's no Fervatus there. Do we have any plants it needs? And we started adding some plants in. And what you can see is, if you look at this, the only plant there for pollen, and I told you they need pollen the whole season, like from April to, September, they're covered for maybe sometime in June and July. So that's not going to, if this was a bigger landscape and we didn't have these plants on the other area, that wasn't going to help that Fervatus. And then if you look at the nectar, we don't have anything real early. We don't have anything really late. And you really, while this says July, August, September for this plant blooming, it's not like it's necessarily blooming all 3 months. It's blooming for some period of time in there. You really need more plants than this to take care of these species. So here we are. This is the Hummingbird Garden. We're out there, we're looking, we're weeding. There's monarch butterflies, there's other butterflies, but no Fervatus. So we're adding the plants in. It's one of the things you can do. This is another garden up there. We have a lot of pretty flowering plants you can see, and we're weeding, and now we're adding more of the plants from Dr. G. Gear's list, because this garden also never had any Fervatus or vagans. So one of the things I like to say, we have 2 methods to utilize Dr. G. Gear's list. One is careful analysis and thoughtful planning. You take inventory of the existing plants you have on your landscape, and then fill in what you don't have for both pollen and nectar. That's for the bumblebees, host plants for butterflies, to get a full suite of what these at-risk species need. One of the things I also wanted to mention is some of the at-risk other bees include specialist bees. A report came out, I don't know if it was last year, about specialist bees and their needs. And, I ran it by Dr. G. Gear, and he was very clear. Just because you're a specialist bee, if your historic numbers are the same today or better than they were before, they're not at risk and they don't need our help. We don't need to run out and plant all these plants for the specialist bees. Same thing with a rare bee. You look, is the rare bee rare historically, and is it just as rare today? Well, then we don't need to be worried about it. It's just a rare bee. If it's a rare bee, that's declining at risk, if it's a specialist bee that's declining at risk, Dr. G. Gear's plant list is covering that. So that's why we're very comfortable being focused on his plant list. Oh, and the other, I'm sorry, I interrupted myself on my train of thought, is that there's different ways to do this, but you can just plant something, anything on his list in your yard. Massing matters. So if you have space, he prefers 1 meter by 1 meter of the same plant, better than putting in 10 plants in that same 1 meter by 1 meter. And you can also start by participating in the EnergizeWayland winter sow program we're going to have in January. So part 4. Oh, I think I have the wrong thing, but anyhow, the library, what has Southborough been up to now? We got some funding, our library, and I'm just putting this up there. If anyone has a library, to work with your library, this grant is only applied for by the library, but talk with them, see what your library has for priority, see if this could fit in. It's not a simple thing, because libraries have lots of needs, lots of programs, and they can only get one of these type of grants a year. So it needs to be in the queue, but it is a source of funding, and my library did apply and get it, and they allocated $3,000 for us. And we planted over 600 plants. We decided to go with larger plants because we really wanted an instant garden, but you don't have to do that. This is the area that we put the plants in. Here we are marking it. This is a whole cool way of doing it. That's another presentation, but you plant by numbers. Every plant has a species, has a number, and every flag has the same number. So you match it up. Sort of like paint by numbers, you plant by numbers. And here we are, they're going in. Oh, one thing, if you're making a garden, I've stolen some of these slides from other presentations, but be aware of where your water source is and how you're going to get water there. One thing great about native plants is once they're established, they don't need water. Those pollinator gardens, the Hummingbird and the other gardens on Breakneck Hill, after we established them in like 2012 12, we don't water them. When we put a new plant in, that gets water to get in, but they've gone through droughts and everything. And it's sort of like, that's the beauty of why we're planting natives. This here is another section of the library garden. We're doing a lawn alternative. This is wild strawberry, not on Rob's list, but in back, that's prunella, which is one of the plants that we put in the Ecology research garden. And the first year it bloomed, it was, you know, Bombus Fervatus and vegans were on it all the time. And then in back, we're putting in some carrots, different types. There's a different view we considered. So one of the points I'm talking about here, why am I focused on this garden? We're trying to have public display gardens because these plants are important, but people don't know them. They're not familiar with them. And we want to show them in a, you know, a landscaped setting, not a, you know, wild meadow like the Ecology research garden is, where people will not be looking necessarily to go visit a garden, but maybe when they're returning a book, they'll see, oh, that's pretty, and come over. We'll be able to do interpretive signage, as well as we will have programming where this whole back area, we're looking at it as an outdoor nature based activity area. Dr. G. Gear is going to present some BID workshops. So we're very excited about it. It's another view. And as we were planting, the bumblebees were arriving. And before we put this garden in, there was nothing. I mean, there might have been some honeybees on the white clover in the somewhat of a lawn area. So this is another project we have. Got $20,000 at town meeting. It involves, this is our golf course. That's a hedge of Japanese knotweed. Once we get, it's a 3-year plan to get the knotweed out, and then we're going to have funds to replace it with native plants from Dr. G. Gear's list. That actually made it into our warrant article for CPA funding. This is the Beals Preserve in Southborough Open Land Foundation with Beals. It was, we're looking, where could we get a little place to put this garden in? That's the designation. Here we are. We decided we would do the soil prep for a year and then try to plant it next year. And what's the budget? Well, we have no money for this. And we're anticipating using some winter sow plants this year to plant next year. This is how we prep the soil. We put the cardboard down and brought wood chips on top. And actually this season in the fall, it was good enough to plant. I just didn't have plants. We had a few left over from last year's winter sow that went in. That's just some of our volunteers. Volunteers with gators is priceless. That cracked me up. Part 5 is winter sow. And back to the going, gone. So we want to get these plants from Dr. G. Gear's list into the habitat. And here's Dr. G. Gear again. I'm sorry, I've cut and pasted this PowerPoint and there might be some. Here's our Ecology research garden planting plan again. Okay, so what I want to talk about here, I'm not at the winter sow yet. This here are pretty garden flowers on the Dr. G. Gear's list. There's no reason we can't incorporate these into our yards and think we have pretty flowers. And that's what we're trying to show. This is at the Ecology research garden, but it shows that, you know, you can make nice plant combinations. This is it again. There are those awful wood chips, but we're, you know, slowly they'll decompose and we'll put in some ground covers. These here are all plants on Dr. G. Gear's list, except for every once in a while, I will break a rule and I put in the cardinal flower because, well, it's red and I like red, the pop of color, but it also is a plant for hummingbirds, which it's important to show people that they can feed birds and, you know, promote pollination without having to put a, you know, hummingbird feeder, which is just really for our pleasure to see the birds up close. Really need to be thinking about what the pollination system needs. These are the little white bags in the background, and all this over here is willow for early spring plants. This here is in the garden again. This is the Penstemon Digitalis, this tall red. Beautiful plant, beautiful flowers, and it got even redder and more beautiful and vibrant as the fall progressed. But what I wanted to also show is these smaller cabbage-like plants. Those were just seeds and milk jugs last winter. And look at them here, they are. They'll be beautiful flowering plants next year. This is Shrubby St. John's wort. It's like my new favorite plant. This had Bombus vagans using it. It bloomed for such a long period. It was blooming so long, we wanted to collect, in Southborough, we collect the seeds for our winter sow project. And I was like, hurry up and be done so we can collect some seeds. Well, so it was long blooming. It attracted the at-risk species, and it's really pretty. I have to say that again, it is really pretty. And then when it finally did go to seed, as you saw earlier, there's the white-throated sparrow, state listed. How magnificent is that? Beautiful, beautiful. I'm sorry, I don't have her name on it. My friend Dawn Bessie, she helps out a lot by taking a lot of photos for us. Oh, I might be having to. I'm going to have to flash through this because I cut and pasted, I guess, the same PowerPoint twice. Here, finally, part 5, winter sow. Let's hope that's right. Well, here we go. So EnergizeWayland, they're investing in these plants. These are seeds they're going to give out to everyone who participates, and maybe if they fill up to other people too. We chose, I was told that they landscape and yards in Wayland has a lot of shade, so that we picked plants that would do well in the shade. Here's a list that will be sent out. It showcases the 8 plants. It shows some attributes of them. A lot of the pictures were not just out of, magazines or, plant lists. They're ones, I think I even took one of them, but, local people have taken these plants once they start planting them. And then it shows which months they, what their characteristics are of the plant, but when they bloom and which species of at-risk bumblebees they help. So now I'm going to my friend Gary. When I said we take people from outside of town, Gary was one of my better finds. He's gung-ho. He's been running these native plant winter sow workshops. He has a garden planned in Northborough. He started helping us, volunteering with us, and then he went to his own town, got land, and then he's now doing winter sow to actually get the plants for that garden, as well as he's doing it in his at his job for Sanofi in Framingham. So I'm really not that I'm not that interested in giving you a lot of description about the winter sow, because we're going to have a workshop. We can send you videos later. Basically, the thought, though, is that our winter sow is because our native plants co-evolved with our weather, and they need a series of freezing, thawing, so that the seeds can break dormancy and germinate. And if you think about it, why that's necessary, the seeds, a lot of these plants drop their seeds in the fall or early winter, and then come January thaw, you don't want them sprouting out and becoming shooting out sprouts so that they would then freeze when it got cold again. So the plant's seeds evolved, shouldn't say no, but evolved, so that they need this freezing, thawing, and then in the spring they will start to come out as little plants. And some plants will germinate in earlier spring, summer, and some not till almost the end of the summer. So each one is different. And then when you have them, as you saw, the Penstemon was an early sprouter, so that we got plants that were really quite big, quicker than some others hadn't even broken the surface. So why do we use these milk jugs? Well, you can do lots of other ways of sowing. If you sow into the ground, you have a lot of predation from, chipmunks and squirrels and birds and, so not that many actually make it. So if you sow them into a container, you have better luck. And the beauty of the milk jug is that once you close it all up, it's almost like its own little terrain, can't even say the word right, sorry, but its own mini greenhouse. And you just put it outside and you can almost forget about it. Just check once in a while to make sure it hasn't dried out. We'll make these little containers out of like a soda plastic bottle with poked holes in the lid so that it can fit right into that opening. You leave it open so it gets some moisture. And then you want the gallon size because the other ones, we've used them, but they're not easy enough to get the plants out of. And also people use like salad containers or, those takeout containers, and they're just really not that great. And use the gallon, we cut them, we poke holes in the bottom. We're not using the potting soil because we're using a different, but you can use the Coast of Maine organic potting soil. You have duct tape. All of this will be given out to this list to the people participating, and then we can make it available. He drills holes in the bottom for drainage. Well, people at home, you don't have to drill holes. You just want to be careful you don't stab yourself if you're poking a knife through it. You put the soil in, you plant the seeds. You want to make sure you don't plant the seeds too deep. Some of them are just on the top. There's, well, one of the things is that in nature, plants aren't a quarter of an inch to a half inch apart. They'll all just grow with abandon. So if you overseed, it's not that bad. We've had people that this whole thing becomes total plants, and you just plant them, cut it up into small pieces, like we call it a hunk of seeds, and put them in the ground, and they sort of work it out themselves. You want to label. Labeling's a big deal. I mean, all of this will go over, but constantly people are like, oh, I can't read my label in the spring. What is it? And we'll go, well, when it blooms, we'll know, right? But I don't worry about it so much. But you can put a label inside, and we have these special pens to market. The only thing is in the spring, you have to open them up so that the plants don't cook. So that hinge on the milk jug will open up. You let them not get too hot. And then if you have a very cold night, you want to close it up again. There's a little bit of care that way, but really not much. Just make sure they don't get dried out. And then we transplant them. You can do lots of things. People have put them into individual plugs. It's not needed. I had a friend who did that, and I knew she would never do it again. She took tweezers, she put each one in a little plug, and then she got up from the table and dropped them all on the floor and had to do it again. And the next year I said, Joyce, you're never going to do that again, plant this again, are you? And she goes, no. And then I found online this hunk of seed method. You take, like a quarter of the jug or an eighth of the jug, you just cut it up, and you can either put it in another pot to let it grow. I have some people who are growing it over the winter, or you can just put it in the dirt like we did with the Penstemon you saw in that other picture before. And I guess that's it. These are the jugs. You can see them duct taped. You can see that's opened. These are plants these are the pens. So here's some references. We'll send you out this, but it has Dr. G. Gear's lab, which has his plant list, the Ecology app, so that you can go there and report. And I really didn't mention enough about the MCA Native, and we've changed our name. We're the Native Pollination Systems Task Force, and we have lots of resources. We have done lots of videos, and we have lots of information for you. And I haven't even looked at the clock, so I have no idea how my time is. But I'll stop sharing.
I think you're perfect on time. Thank you, Freddie, for such a great presentation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jean because she's going to go through the questions that have been asked.
Oh, I thought it was done. No, just kidding. I'll answer.
Jean, you're muted. Jean, you're muted.
Again, I'm Jean Milburn. Thanks everybody for being here and for the questions that we're starting to see in the chat. We have a question about high bush blueberry for Freddie, and that one of the concerns is that there's so many cultivars being used because people want the larger fruit that come on the cultivars. So the question to Freddie is, do you need to do straight species high bush blueberry?
Well, my answer is always going to be yes. Now, somebody else can do more research, but the question is, what did the plant give up in order to produce bigger berries,
Right.
right? What did the plant give up? Does it have the same nectar as a one of the things they're just starting to do is testing with DNA to see actually what the composition of the nectar is. Does it have the right, qualities that the birds co-evolve to use that plant for? I can't say always yes or no, but why risk it? You're spending your dollars to create and plant plants for habitat. Why risk it is my question. Maybe not. Odds are not as good. Mother Nature kind of knew best, in my opinion. So we have high bush blueberry. We try to get native straight species. And I'll tell you the other thing about the straight species. It's not just about the nectar and if the butterflies, does it satisfy all their needs as a host plant? It's about genetic diversity. Most cultivars are clones. They're not, they're just the same plant over and over again. And if you get a disease, for instance, that's going to wipe them out, there's no genetic diversity that might have a plant that might be able to continue on the lineage that will be resistant to that disease. And I don't know if this question is going to come up, but there was one thing I really did want to mention. Doug Tallamy. I am such a huge fan of Doug Tallamy. I go to his talks. I want to have like a lighter and wave it back and forth. I camp out for hours before he speaks so I can get a good seat. I can't say enough. He really, really impressed and changed my perspective before I even met Dr. G. Geer. And what I like to think of is Dr. G. Geer is honing in more on his Dr. Tallamy's research, because the plants on Dr. Tallamy's research were based on providing the most. If you go to the National Wildlife Federation, like which plants, the keystones, support the most caterpillars, right? Well, but you also need to be planting for the species that are disappearing. And if you look at Rob's list, he has many of the plants, the keystone plants. He has willow, there's oak for sure. There's, I forget what some of the other plants, I'm sorry, just went out my brain. But, plants on Dr. G. Geer's list are also some of the keystone plants on Doug Tallamy's list, but you're also focusing in and helping the at-risk species. And I hope I made clear that we have lots of butterflies in this ecology research garden. It's not like we just planted for these specific at-risk species and nothing else shows up. We have monarchs laying eggs. We have lots of other butterflies and bees coming in. It's just at the other gardens that aren't planted for the at-risk species, we don't have the at-risk species. So it makes more sense to me that we need to focus on these plants. And again, I drive through my town and I look at the landscape and I go, now that I can spot it. I can almost smell it, that there's nothing native there. I can drive through, it's just grass and lawn and non-native plants. And I go, nope, no caterpillars for the birds. But we can plant Dr. G. Geer's plants, help the at-risk species, as well as have lots of caterpillars for lots of birds. Sorry, you have questions, but I just did need to talk about Doug.
Wait. We have a number of questions about the plastic milk jugs. Where can they be obtained? For those of you who are interested in coming to the next program, we will include in our informational literature where if absolutely necessary, you could buy milk jugs very inexpensively. But for most people, I think it's going to be best for you to just send some emails to your friends who do drink milk and ask if they will save a few of their milk jugs for you. And if folks have milk jugs to donate, we will also put in that literature where you can donate milk jugs, because we're hoping to do about 300 of them. So we're going to need a lot.
I could jump in there, is that last year and with COVID, we had a lot of people, we packaged up over 700 packets of native seeds. We had, I don't know how many hundreds of milk jugs needed. And I was just like, I've done my job. I collected the seeds, we cleaned them, we put them in packets, we took your order and distributed them. And then the emails and the Facebook posts started coming. Where can I get milk jugs? I've been telling people all fall, get milk jugs. They hadn't done it. Well, in Southborough, we're lucky we have a recycling center. So we went there and we worked with the staff there who helped put aside. We had a big box, milk jugs. We, it was like this milk jug quest. People were, it was this whole crazy thing all last winter. You got jugs, you got milk jugs? No, but I got some. Do you want some? It was just the funniest thing. It was a lot of work too. So this year we're kind of prepared. My friend Gary from Northborough, he found at his local Starbucks, he worked it out with them, and he goes by every afternoon and collects them. And the other thing I want to tell you, if you get milk jugs, be sure you clean them good, because my girlfriend didn't understand why some animal came up onto her porch and took her winter sow away. And then she saw like a raccoon. And then when she got it back, she goes, oh, maybe I didn't clean it out so well. I'm not sure if it was a raccoon or a possum, whatever it was dragging her milk jug off her porch. She chased it down. And so make sure you clean them well. But there's lots of places, if you think about it, start posting on Facebook. Or if you're not on Facebook, email your friends.
Nextdoor is a good place to post things as well. So Freddie, we have a question here about the source of funding for the library pollinator garden. Was that community preservation funds?
Nope. So the library garden in Southborough was I might get it wrong, LSTA, and they have a dig-in grant, and that's a grant that's made to libraries. And what I was trying to say is that only the library can apply. So if you're interested in having a garden at your library, you need to go and talk to your library staff. And what I also said is these grants, they can get one a year. And it might be technology. They might have it lined up that they're doing a children's thing, or, some sort of, I'm not even sure all the different projects the library might want. You have to get into their queue. And even if you're not doing it now, start the conversation. And then the CPA, we did use CPA funding for a grant at the golf course where we're doing habitat restoration, removing the Japanese knotweed. And then after that's removed, we're putting in plants from Dr. Jagir's list. So that's another type. You can use CPA money. For CPA, you need to talk to your committee to make sure you're in line with what their goals and their requirements are. And you may need a little help using, it's always about the description, that you're using the right words so that it fits the requirements of the CPA legislation. Some towns have thought like, oh, it doesn't count if you're not buying land, so find out what your town's committee feels like is proper, and then try to work with them to make your project fit that.
Okay, let's see. Someone has asked, where can they get seeds if they're not in Wayland? I know some of the participants here this evening are from surrounding towns. If you're a close drive nearby, we'll be distributing seeds to people from neighboring towns as well. And that information will come out in the literature. Our source where we have purchased seeds is Ernst, which you can find online and has a huge selection of seeds.
Yes, they like you to buy an ounce. So not the common homeowner is going to want to buy that many seeds. It could be 100,000 seeds or more. It's economical if you go in with friends, but there's a couple of places, and I really want to promote the Wild Seed Project in Maine. They have people going out and collecting, and these are local Maine ecotype, which is a whole nother story, but you know, it's best to get plants, even if it's native throughout the whole region, to get plants that are the ecotype of your area. You know, no guarantee that everything is, if it's growing, like we planted plants at Breakneck Hill, many of them probably came from the Midwest originally. So if you collected seeds there, I can't say, oh, they're Massachusetts ecotype. I can say they made it through our winter and they're doing well. But Wild Seed Project in Maine, they're a nonprofit. They have great information on their website, and they sell seed packets. There's another one called, and we can send this information out. It was at the bottom of that last slide I had, I think, Toadshade Wildflower Farm, I think is the name of it. It has seeds. We recommend, if you don't have to, don't buy them from Prairie Moon in the Midwest, because the fear is we're planting all of New England with Midwest ecotype. And, you know, at least with the Ernst seed, I asked for as close to Massachusetts as possible for the ecotype. And we have like Pennsylvania, maybe some New Jersey, New York.
So Freddie, would you like to comment on the native plants sold at Russell's?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to tell everyone, it doesn't matter where you shop. You need to be informed, and you need to understand what indicates a cultivar. If there's a name after the scientific sounding name, and it's usually in italics. So like if it's it has a scientific name and then it says David or Sunset or Hot Lips. That's the turtle head. That one cracked me up. That's a cultivar. The scientific names don't name them, and it's usually pretty clear, and it's in italics. So Russell's in Northborough, Russell's in Wayland. I can't talk that well about their selection because I have been there and seen not that many straight species. I think they're interested in doing better. I was thinking of Bigelow's in Northborough. We've been working with them for about, 5 or 6 years, and they have consistently increased their native straight species offerings. So you have to know, you go to their native plant table and it looks great, but you have to read the labels and see if it's a straight species or not. And they're not going to tell you. And all of the nurseries, aside from the real specialist ones, we'll call them all natives, because in the hort industry and the nursery industry, if it's a cultivar and the name nativars, if you see that, that's a marketing term to fool you. They're a cultivar of a native, and it's still a cultivar. And we really want to have native straight species, which are seed, takes more time to grow them by seed. If anyone's familiar with Ellen Sousa, she gives courses at Native Plant Trust. She also wrote the book, The Green Garden. Doug Tallamy wrote a review of it back when it first came out. She started a nursery out in Spencer, but you can look her up. I can send a link to that, as well as down in Pembroke. There's one, it's a great one. It's called Blue Stem Natives, I think. We can send a link to that. So, and I also like that these are women-owned companies growing native plants. So there's more of these small places out in Western Mass. There's a few too. So, they're more and more available. And the one great thing is that the Native Pollination Systems Task Force, and I should send a link because it's kind of hard to maneuver the website. There's so much information, it's easy to get lost. It was a point in time, but we went through all of Dr. G. Gear's plants and listed all the nurseries that sell them. And you can look it up 3 ways. You can look by nursery, you can look by plant, and you can look by all, the whole data sheet. Another place, there's a couple of places, there's New England pollinator plants. They're out of Vermont. And there's also, I think it's called White Bagley Pond out of New Hampshire. And I'm wary about telling people this because then when I go to look for plants, they're sold out because all my friends bought them out before I got there. But the more the demand, the more people carry them. And we're hoping places like Russell's increases their straight species. It's a, well-intentioned. Western Nurseries is another one. We're hoping they get better at it because their native offerings at Western Nurseries haven't been that great. I sent someone there. I didn't send someone there. Someone went there and they came back. They said, oh yeah, I asked them about what are great plants for pollinators. And they came home with butterfly bush. And if anyone knows, that's a non-native that's probably invasive. So, you really have to do your homework before you go and go with a list. And one of the things I like to tell people is you have to have a list because otherwise, even you see these beautiful robust flowering plants and it's like you want them. But, really, our native species are just as beautiful. You saw some of those pictures I had. I hope they enticed you to grow native.
So Freddie, we have a question about what method you're using to remove Japanese knotweed when you're preparing a site.
I only have one project at the golf course. And I know people will not agree with this, but I actually wasn't prepared for this question tonight. But I will tell you, I spoke with the head conservation person at Native Plant Trust, and he has the same position. It's not our go-to to use chemicals, but when all else fails and in a specific situation, we use chemicals. We hire a licensed professional, spot treating specifically as little as possible. What I like to say is, if you're concerned about chemicals, we're using way less on this habitat restoration than what your neighbors are around your block using on dandelions. And for what purpose? It's a evil. I say prayers about it, I'll tell you, because I do worry. It's not great. We try other methods first. But when you saw that Oriental bittersweet at Breakneck Hill, those, 40 acres, there's no way we'd still be having goats there or hand pulling it, and it wouldn't have the at-risk species of grassland birds nesting there or any of this pollinator habitat. It was a monoculture, and sometimes the chemical use benefit outweighs the temporary problem. And I also say, I hope in the future, if I'm really wrong in pursuing this method, that people will forgive me, knowing I did what I thought was best with the knowledge I had. And believe me, I've been to many, many invasive species workshops. I've talked to the top experts, and I've talked to native plant and other gardeners. So I won't win any prizes from the organic gardening folks, but once we get rid of it, and then you can start to manage it. So that's my answer. That's my choice. We think everyone has to make their own choices. So I don't promote it.
So thank you for that, Freddie. Let's look at this question about leaving the leaves on your planting beds. Are you leaving leaves on the native plant beds?
Well, it's a funny question because yes, and I was struggling with it because if you recall the picture of the garden at the library, it looked like a big lawn around it, right? And last year, the landscape company came in, they blew all the leaves into the woodlands, right? Or they chopped them up. And then I looked, I was like, oh my God, the trees were like shoulder high with all this, an acre of leaves all chopped up and blown in there. And I was like, oh, that's no good. So this year I went to the DPW. I'm still laughing because I checked it out the other day and I haven't gotten in trouble yet. I went to the DPW and I said, oh, I need you to not have them come with blowers and blow those leaves. I need you to leave them right where they are. And I think I'm looking at it. So where the new pollinator garden was planted, that has leaf cover. That's a winter mulch. We may have to pull it aside if the plants are getting covered up. And then the rest of the lawn area, I'm like, I'm not sure, because everyone says leave the leaves, but then how do you really manage it in an area where other people want to see? When I say lawn, that's not lawn. It's a lot of another story, but creeping Charlie and other stuff. And we want it to be native ground cover in there. But we're thinking where we want to do some more planting, we might gently rake some of the leaves over to create a thick mat that will do, instead of cardboard, it will kill the lawn there and we can plant there. I've seen some beautiful displays of people doing art, like with, I posted it on the Southborough Native Plant Facebook group. It's like these gorgeous designs. And it's like, well, how long would that last? It's really pretty with trails through it. But, one wind blow, maybe it's a temporary thing. I don't really know the answer. And we're looking to find out more, because I think you need to leave some. But I don't know that for people with lawns, it's feasible to leave them all. And what are you going to do with the rest? And we have some people who are creating these compost piles in their yards. And then the next year they'll put it somewhere else. But I do know that if you have a heavy, thick mat, like under oak trees, it's not as benign as you think in the typical ways we landscape today. If you have a woodland lot, that's fine. If you're my house, I don't rake my leaves or blow them away. It's just sort of, oh, well, but a big wind comes and they blow them to my neighbor's yard. I'm not sure. So I haven't gotten in trouble at the library, but we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Well, I think we've covered the questions, unless somebody would like to unmute themselves and ask a question at this time. Oh, I'm not hearing any. Shelley, do you want to take over?
Sure. So thank you. Thanks, Jean, for doing the questions. And thank you, Freddie. I mean, this has been great. We really enjoyed hearing your talk and looking forward to our next in-person winter sow, which will be happening January 5th. So mark your calendar. And if you want to register for that, you can go to the EnergizeWayland site. It has my email. You have to register by sending me an email with your name, address, and we will send you the information on the winter sow and what you need to bring to the winter sow, and how you can get the jugs if you need jugs, etc. But anyone who does have jugs, milk jugs or water jugs that they want to donate, you can also email me. I'll be going around Wayland at least picking them up, and we'll take everything we can get, because we need a lot of milk jugs, as Freddie said. So thanks again. Ellen, anything to end it with?
No, I just say thanks to everyone for coming, and this has been great learning a lot. You please register on the EnergizeWayland.org site, create a profile, click that you're doing eco landscaping, see what else you can do. We've got some events coming up on heat pumps in January with our wonderful local heat pump coach. So stay tuned for that, and have a good evening and happy holidays.
Night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for
Bye.
coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.